Assalamu alaikum. It's really important for us to learn how to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to connect with Him without barriers, without unnecessary formalities. So there are etiquettes, adab and etiquettes that we should use when we're making dua, but we don't want to make unnecessary formalities and barriers between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what I love about these gatherings is that we bring everything to Allah, all the things, the big, the small, we bring Him all the things and we ask Him. And when you start asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll see that He can do everything. And we know it like rationally that like He's in control of everything, but really you'll see it happen in your life in ways you don't expect. Uh, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is in our prayers, a lot of times now that we're coming into Ramadan, obviously it's fasting and it's the month of the Quran and community. And but one of the really important things is Ramadan is the prayers. And before we even talk about the Taraweeh, it's our five farad prayers. If the only thing we did this Ramadan is to perfect our five farad prayers, then that will be extraordinary. So I know sometimes we go into Ramadan and we're like, I need to do this, I need to do that. Like there's so many things, and that's beautiful. And I encourage you, to push hard in Ramadan. I don't want to discourage anyone, but I want to make sure that in doing all the things, we're not losing track of the anchors. And our anchor is our Father. Not be losing track of that for anything else. Something that I found in my own experience with Salah is that I do believe Salah is my anchor. I do believe it is the thing that holds me in this deen. It's the thing that keeps me as a practicing Muslim. Like that's my defining thing. And without it, it's very easy to slip and go astray. However, even though I'm really attached to the Salah in that way, in the sense that I believe it is my primary duty. Like that's the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us about. And yet I often come to Salah distracted and I just kind of go through the motions. Like I just rush through just to like check it off. Like I did my Salah. I kept that duty. I did it. And yet when we do that, we're really selling ourselves short because the Salah is not something we do for Allah. It's something He asked us to do for ourselves. He prescribed it upon us for our own benefit. And so it's really important that we think about what am I getting out of the Salah? If the only, you know how there's that hadith that Prophet ﷺ says, like, if the only, like some people, the only thing they're getting out of their fasting is hunger and thirst. Like you're doing all the fasting, you're only getting hunger and thirst. You're supposed to get all these spiritual gains and all this reward, but you're just getting the hunger and thirst. I think of that a little bit with the Salah, that like the only thing I might be getting out of it is just that like I did the actual like actions of it and said the words, but like did I get the spiritual gain? Did I get the connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did I get the spiritual growth? Did I get the physiological impact? There's a physiological impact when you do these meditative experiences, when you do these physical movements of the Salah. Am I getting all of that out of it? Oftentimes, unfortunately, I'm not. And so this is something I've been reflecting on and working on, which is when you study the Salah in the jurisprudence, in the schools of jurisprudence, the fiqh, like in the Shafi'i school or the Hanafi school, there are certain parts of the Salah that are farad, that are obligatory, meaning like if you don't do those particular things correctly, your Salah doesn't count. And there are other parts that are encouraged. I mean, they're recommended, but they don't invalidate your Salah. For example, I'm going to just really briefly go through with us today what are the obligatory parts of the Salah for a reason, not for a jurisprudence lesson, but because I want to reflect on a few elements of this. So the first thing that is mandatory in your Salah is the intention. And so that's very important because when we say our intention for Salah, it's not about the formula that you use. It's it's about the, yes, you're supposed to like verbalize it, but it's about what it is in your heart truly. And do we really stop to think about our intention before we start our prayer? Or do we just say like, I intend 4 rak'ahs of dhuhr, and get right into it? And why do I say that? Because if we if we really think about our intention, then we have to be asking ourselves, why am I praying? Why am I stopping what I'm doing and standing here on this prayer mat right now and praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's what my intention is. So yes, there's the formula of like, I have to intend that it's for this particular salah. You do, like it's for dhuhr, it's for rak'ahs, whatever. But what's the real intention? When you change your intention in that way, when you make it more meaningful, more intentional, it will impact the entire prayer. So the first rukn of salah is the intention. The second one is the opening takbir. So when we say that Allahu Akbar, we are saying, oh Allah, all this stuff in my life, all of it, that literally I carry it, it bogs me down, all of it, you are greater than it. When we look at the powers of the world today that are trying to destroy the ummah, Allah is greater than that. So this Allahu Akbar is a mandatory part of our salah. The next, number 3, is the standing. When we stand, that position, that physical body, that is mandatory. And then the Fatiha, reciting the Fatiha, and that has to be said correctly. If you miss a single letter of Al-Fatiha, then that invalidates it. So we've done an intention, Allahu Akbar, we've stood and we've said Al-Fatiha. The next part that's mandatory is the bowing when you get into ruku'. And this is where 5 is bowing, and number 6 is you stand up after bowing, and number 7 is the prostration, the 2 sajdas. And number 8 is the sitting between the 2 sajdas. So I'm just gonna go through those really quick and then I'll pause. So we bowed, we stood up from, we bowed, we stood up from bowing, we did sajda, we sat between the sajdas, we did another sajda, okay? What you'll notice that's not mandatory is the words that you say during those motions. Yes, there are formulas. You're supposed to say certain words, but they do not invalidate your salah. Why is that important? Because as Muslims, okay, so a lot of Muslims and a lot of non-Muslims are really into yoga, right? Like yoga is all about movements. And if you ever do like a yoga class or whatever, the thing is, I know there's a lot of difference of opinion about yoga. I don't want to get into that, like, is it Hinduism or whatever? But my point is, it's about the movement and the stillness. You're supposed to hold the pose. That's the thing. And I never thought of in a salah that the movement is what's critical. In our salah, the mandatory part is holding that position. It's the position, it's the physical movement. And I'm always focusing on like the words. Like if I can get into my ruku' and say, Subhana Rabbil Azim, Subhana Rabbil Azim, Subhana Rabbil Azim, and get up, then like I've done it. But really, it's the movement. And why is that important? Because of the stillness. We are supposed to try to achieve stillness in Islam, in our salah. And so when you change your frame of reference from the words to the movement, you will approach your salah very differently. You can go into ruku' and you can just hold that position. And even if you didn't say any words, you would have fulfilled the obligatory part of your salah. When you try that, I hope you guys will try this. And I'm not saying don't say the words. You can still say them, but hold it. Hold the position. Pause there. Get into stillness there. And then say the Subhana Rabbiyal. When you do that, it changes the effect of the salah on you and it slows everything down. And when we think about stillness, it reminds me of the concept we have in Islam of barakah. Barakah is a concept that it's hard to explain in English, but it's, we say blessings. But what barakah really means in Arabic is like, it's like a confined space, a stillness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expands the ability of that space to hold contents. So during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there's a famous story. They were fighting a battle and they were all hungry. And one of the Sahaba invited the Prophet ﷺ for a meal, told his wife, like, prepare a meal. She didn't have much. So she just prepared the little bit that she had. And she said, you can invite the Prophet ﷺ for this small amount of food. And so he told him, and then what did the Prophet ﷺ do? He invited all the Sahaba to come to this man's house for dinner. So he comes back to his wife and he tells her, she's like, what have you done? I told you I only had a little bit. Like, whoa. And I would love this story because when you read all the stories of the Sahaba from the women's perspective, they're great. Like, these women were amazing. She was like, what have you done, my husband? So the Prophet ﷺ comes and all the Sahaba come. He covers the dish, the small dish of food, and they just kept feeding everyone out of it. And the amount in there never decreased. That's what barakah is. He said it, of course, he said a dua over Bismillah and stuff. And then the barakah. Barakah is like, it's a confined amount of space. So when you have barakah in your time, you have the same 60 seconds in your minute as everybody else, but more stuff fits into that minute. And so it's like a Mary Poppins bag. Okay. I heard a sister give this analogy and it's so cool. The Mary Poppins bag. She just has this bag, but she can just keep pulling stuff out of it. Like, she pulls the whole lamp, like it's amazing. And that's how so this is why stillness is important, because when you get into stillness, you leave the space for all of this to come in there, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you all this barakah in this space. And so that's the way I'm reshifting my focus about Salah as I go into Ramadan, is looking for that stillness. And I'll just finish with these last few things, which is sitting between the two prostrations is also important. So you're not supposed to sajda, get up, sajda. You're supposed to pause between them. And that is a time of dua. And then the testification of faith in the last sitting, doing the salawat on the Prophet ﷺ, and then making your first salam. The first salam, salamu alaikum, that's the obligatory one, and the other one is the sunnah one. And the other thing that's mandatory is the order that we do them in. We can't do them in a different order. So, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So I'm reframing the way that I think of Salah. And the other thing I'm trying to do is, when we come into our prayer, we often think of it as a place where I have to focus on my prayer and I'm not supposed to think about anything else. But if you know anything about the way the mind works, you know that once you say, I'm not supposed to think about anything else, you're going to think about all those other things. And so in Salah, rather than saying, I remember learning people would say, like, when you say Allahu Akbar to start, it's like you're throwing everything behind you, and you're leaving it all out of the prayer. I'm going to tell you the opposite. I'm going to ask you to bring it all into the prayer. All of those things in your heart and mind, don't leave them out of your prayer. Bring them into your prayer. So when you stand to make that intention, add into your intention that I'm praying, obviously, because it's a farad, and you want to gain Allah's pleasure, but you want to get closer to Him, and you also help you with X, Y, and Z things that are on your mind today, your marriage or your job or your health or your family member or whatever it is. And then do that. So now what I'm trying to do is, when I'm praying and my mind wanders to something, rather than trying to get that out of my mind and focus back on the words I'm saying, yes, I want to do that, but then I bring that thing into the prayer. So then when I'm in sujood, I start making dua about that thing, whatever it is. And those du'as that you make in sujood are so impactful. You're going to find that those du'as are, the result of them is going to be very amazing, mashallah. So bring all the stuff into your salah, and your salah will be a refuge for you. It will be so much more meaningful than a salah where you're just like trying to block everything out and just stay focused on, no, bring it in. This is Allah. You're talking to Allah. This is your meeting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you a private session. This is your appointed time for these 6 minutes or whatever it is. You're going to meet privately with Him. You're going to bring in all the stuff, pack it in. You got 6 minutes or 10 minutes or however long you want to make this session to pack it in with Allah and ask Him all the things you want to ask. Of course, you can make dua outside of salah. We know that, but oftentimes we're making the mistake of not making the dua also in those moments in our salah, between the two sajdas, in sujood, all these times when you can make dua. You know, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when they would recite verses of Quran that talked about the hellfire or whatever, they would raise their hands and ask Allah to protect them from it. They would make the dua during the salah. So I just want to remind myself and remind you all of these two things. Stillness, bringing stillness into our prayer, making it a true meditative act where we're slowing it down, we're holding the poses, and when you hold the pose, you make a space. You make a space, come into that space. Those are the blessings that Allah is going to give you. Open that space up and let Allah fill it for you. So hold those poses, pause in those moments, slow it down, and then let Allah fill it for you. And the second thing is bringing everything into the salah with you. I want to close with a concept that I heard recently that really impacted me, which was that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts in the Quran, the first surah, as you know, is Al-Fatiha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Al-Alameen, the worlds. What are those worlds? They could be the creatures under the sea. They could be outer space. It could be 2024 world. They could be the world from before, from the time of the dinosaurs. They could be the futuristic world that most of us are never going to see. They could be worlds that no one has even discovered yet. Could be the jinn. It can be Muslims. It could be the non-Muslims. It's everything. Al-Alameen, everything. That's how Allah starts it. Why? Why does he start that way? And then how does he end the Quran? We just recited these verses today. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord, or the caretaker. The Rabb is the caretaker of an-nas, all of humanity. He is the caretaker of all the worlds, and he is the caretaker of all humanity. That's the beginning and that's the end. If you ever think for a moment that this Quran is only for Muslims, then you are doing it an injustice. This is a Quran for all of the worlds, and this is a Lord and a creator and a caretaker for all of the worlds and for all of humanity. And we have to live this out. We have to bring this message to the world. This book is not for us. This is not for us. We do not own this book. This is for everyone. This Quran, it's for everyone. And we are bearing witness to that today. When we see non-Muslims picking up the translation and reading it, they're not even getting the full experience of hearing it or reading it in Arabic, the way it was revealed, and yet they are being so moved by it. And so when we come to the Quran like this, that this is a book for everyone, then it will completely change the way that we approach it and the way we think of it and the way we allow it to come into our hearts and to impact us. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to benefit from the Quran in the way that we need and in the way that He intended for us. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to benefit from our salah in the way that we need and in the way that He intended for us. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to benefit from Ramadan in the way that we need and the way that He intended for us. Ameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad.